Hey there, come on in and stay a while. Today I'm sharing a peek inside my farmhouse kitchen where I make it, not buy it. From my favorite sandwich bread and homemade mayo to garden pickles and canned salsa, these are tried and true staples that save us money, taste better, and help us eat a little healthier too. I hope today's video inspires you to start making something homemade in your kitchen too. Hey there friend, it's Lauren with Rustic Honey, and today I thought it would be fun to go down memory lane together here and review some of the things that I've been making homemade in my kitchen over the last few years rather than buying at the grocery store. I just want to preface this by saying that I generally think that homemade items taste better, they often save us money, and are more healthy for us. But I am also in the camp that you can do all of the things and have flexibility and balance in your diet. I am not going to shame anyone for buying any of these items at the grocery store, and just know that I too often still buy these things for our family. So all of that to say, I'm not an all or nothing person here, but I wanted to share these with you today to encourage you to make the swaps that you want to for your family. Now, as you can see here, we are starting with sandwich bread, and this is baby Ruth a year ago. I was on a quest to get a good sandwich bread recipe going, something easy, and I've kind of got it down to what I think is my favorite go-to recipe now. So here I'm making a recipe for 2 loaves, but I recently came up with a recipe for just 1 loaf, and the last couple times I've made it, everyone in my family has approved. Now, if you've been hanging around with me for a while, you might remember the story of my boys asking me in the grocery store if we could buy regular bread. And what they meant is they wanted the store-bought bread because mom hadn't perfected her sandwich loaf just yet, or they haven't come to appreciate homemade bread enough. So I feel like I have finally perfected that, and they loved my last few loaves I've made. So either I got the recipe just right, or maybe their taste buds are maturing. I'm not sure which. Now, more on the sandwich loaf here in a minute, but I'm going to separate this egg and tell you a little bit about my second item that I no longer, for the most part, buy at the grocery store, and that would be homemade mayo. Now, you saw me separate the egg white from the yolk there, so I'm going to use the egg yolk in my mayo here, and I usually use an avocado oil. I add a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of lemon juice, salt, and Dijon mustard. And then the kicker for me, at least when I make mayo, is to use an immersion blender, hold it over the unbroken yolk, and start it for about 8 to 10 seconds until it starts turning white, and then incorporate the rest of that oil as you move the immersion blender up and down. Now, sometimes you'll find that it doesn't come together. Maybe your yolk is cold. It works best with a room temperature egg. But I want to encourage you that even if it doesn't turn out the first time, there are ways to thicken it up. So a quick Google will show you that you can incorporate another egg into it to emulsify it and thicken it up. Now here's my new bread, and at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you how we've used this in a recent dinner that is probably our favorite summertime meal. So stay tuned for that, but right now I'm going to take you back to the winter, where my sourdough often makes it out of the refrigerator more often than it seems to do in the summer. But I just love baking a large artisan loaf for our family during those winter months because it goes so good with a homemade tomato soup or a roast. I just love having that crusty bread ready to go. Now, if you're unfamiliar with sourdough, I spent an entire year working on those recipes as well, and I've created a nice little resource guide for you with all of my go-to recipes that I use all the time over on my blog, so I'll be sure to link that resource for you below. But I also wanted to talk to you today about making some other items with your sourdough, including English muffins. As soon as my daughter gets all of her kisses in, we'll get back to it. I had some fun going back through these old videos to share with you today. I hope you're enjoying them as well. Now, this is an English muffin recipe that I believe I'm using from farmhouseonboone.com, so it's really easy. It's kind of my go-to when I make English muffins, and again, it's linked in the resource guide that I'll share with you too. But essentially, you just mix it together the night before, and then the morning of, you'll add in your honey and your baking soda and some salt, get it to come together. And then it's kind of gooey, and I just form it into the little balls and put them on my big griddle so that I can do a whole bunch at once. Now, what I like to do here is batch them. And then I will end up freezing these. I'll cut them in half and put them in the freezer. And then that way they can just come out on a quick morning, pop them in the toaster while I make an egg or some sausage, and you have a really delicious from scratch breakfast without much effort through the week. Now, while those finish cooking on the other side, I'm going to mix together a really quick coffee treat, and that is something I never buy at the store, rarely ever, is a coffee creamer. I generally like my coffee black, but on occasion I do like a good iced coffee at home, and this is a really simple recipe. I'll be sure to link below too, with some sweetened condensed milk and some other flavors inside that is just so delicious for a nice cold brew or an iced coffee in the afternoon. Now, the way I do my English muffins, they don't fully cook on the griddle because I feel like they end up burning if I let them go too long. So I pop them in the oven to finish the baking, and then I slice them. Of course, enjoy a few with breakfast in the morning with our homemade mayo, maybe some ham or another breakfast meat that I have sitting around, and some eggs. And it's just such a flavorful from scratch breakfast with really not much effort involved, just a little bit of planning on the front end. Now, my favorite part of something like this is that you can make a whole bunch at once, freeze them, and have them ready to go so that you can have a from scratch breakfast any day of the week. So I'm thinking about doing an upcoming video on scratch made batch cooking that can be done ahead of time and frozen. Let me know in the comments below if that's something that interests you, and I'll be sure to work on that video soon. Now we've got the rest of those ready to pop in the freezer, and I'm going to tell you about our next homemade item, which is homemade granola. Now, I've been one to buy granola in the past to throw quickly on some yogurt parfaits in the morning until I started making my own homemade protein granola, and now I find that it's so simple, I hardly ever spend the money or am willing to spend the money on the protein granola at the store because it's usually pretty pricey for how quickly it disappears around here. So the most expensive ingredient in this, of course, is the protein powder, but it's still more economical than buying the actual the protein granola at the store. So I'm using my honey here. I'm using a little bit of maple extract. Again, if you're new to my channel, I link everything for you in the description box below, so I don't go over all of the measurements here in the video. So I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible for you to be able to print that off or copy it off for later. So everything will be down below. Now we add in an egg white just to get those little clusters, get things coming together. And then I also throw in a little bit of coconut oil, and that helps to crisp up those clusters in the oven. And this is just such a yummy treat. Now, once I have everything well incorporated here, you can see the clumps are starting to come together. I'm gonna lay this out on a parchment lined baking sheet and pop this in the oven for about half of the baking time. And then I'm going to stir it around again and pop it back in so that we can kind of get all of this golden and crispy around the edges. Now, once it's completely cooled, I like to store this in a mason jar. I usually make fairly small batches, but I have heard people say you can freeze this. Again, I have not tried that method just yet, but I do plan to do that in the future because I love having this like just ready to go on top of yogurt, or sometimes you'll even find me snacking on it out of the jar when I have a little bit of a sweet tooth in the afternoon. So if you are still buying granola at the grocery store, be sure to try this. It's such an easy prep, doesn't take long, and it will save you so much money, and it's so easy to customize to just how you like it. Now, my next homemade item is pancakes, and I recently shared this with you guys because I finally got my printable recipe for our go-to pancakes up on my blog. So again, that will be linked for you below. I can pretty much make this recipe from memory at this point because I've made it for my children, excuse me, for my children so many times, and they still request it just over and over and over again. I think the thing that makes this recipe delicious is because there's so much butter in it. I just stick everything in a bowl. I don't make a huge mess when I make pancakes. I try to stick to one bowl, even though that's probably not the best way to put them together. It's just so simple, and the butter just makes them so flavorful that I can eat these without any syrup at all. They're so delicious, and I don't think there's any pancake batter I've ever bought at the store that I feel like I want to eat without syrup on it. So definitely give these a try. Now, speaking of syrup though, I've gotten to a point where, of course, we love to have real maple syrup in our home, but sometimes it's not as economical as having a pancake syrup. It's a little cheaper to buy that, but I don't like all of the high fructose corn syrup and the extra additives. The caramel colors and things that are in that. So I've started making my own pancake syrup. I'll be sure to link one below that I've used, and it turns out great. So simple to do and store in the fridge. I have to say, I find it much more delicious than any store-bought pancake syrup. You most likely already have all of the ingredients. Now, speaking of ingredients, let's head out to our garden for the next few ingredients for our homemade items. Now, we are fortunate enough to have a really large backyard garden. Unfortunately, I guess part of this is footage from last year and my huge tomato harvest, which is not happening this year. This year we had tons and tons of rain, and our garden was flooded for a good part of the spring. So we did not have much of a tomato harvest at all. So I'm thankful, as I review this footage from last year, that I was able to put up as many tomatoes as I did. In this video, as I will link below, I believe I mentioned that this was my third picking of our tomatoes, and these tomatoes were actually the smallest ones that I had harvested. So looking at that now, I'm thinking, oh man, I wish I at least had just this harvest this year. But that's just how it goes sometimes with gardening. Some years are really good, some years aren't so good, and we just harvest what we can. Thank goodness we do have grocery stores at this point, where we don't have to rely on our garden harvest so much. But it is so rewarding to be able to turn your hard work into food for the winter and there beyond. Now, you can turn garden tomatoes into many homemade luxuries like tomato sauce, salsa, tomato juice, tomato sauce, ketchup, etc. But today in this video, I am sharing with you our salsa, which is generally a very much a go-to that we do every year with our tomatoes. So I am putting in some jalapenos, bell peppers, onions, cilantro, all the seasonings. And one thing I highly recommend is if you're doing a large batch of anything with tomatoes, grab yourself a roaster oven and let it cook in there and thicken throughout the day. Because oftentimes with tomatoes from the garden, you have to cook them down to get that thicker consistency that you're looking for in a salsa rather than like a tomato sauce or juice. So cooking it down in a roaster saves you so much time and effort, and it makes the kitchen a little bit less hot as you're canning. As you can see, my kitchen is so warm in the summer because we have these big windows in here, and then I get my rolling boiling water canner going, and it is just a steamy mess in here. Now, if you're interested in learning more about canning, I'm going to link some of my favorite tools and resources for you in the description box below. One thing I have to say though is if you're new to canning, I feel like water bath canning, like I'm doing here for certain products like tomatoes, is an easier intro into canning rather than pressure cooking. So it's just a little bit more intense, I guess, with pressure canning. I feel like water bath canning is a little bit more beginner friendly. So definitely don't be too intimidated by the process. I have learned a lot over the last few years from other canners in my life, including my mother-in-law. Shout out, thank you, Cindy, for all of your help and teaching me all the things over the years. But it is a process and you can totally do it. Now, as you saw there, I also shared some bread and butter pickles that I canned last year. But this year I don't have as many cucumbers. These are actually cucumbers that Cindy gave me from her garden. So I am going to just do a quick pickle in the refrigerator. Now, this is something you could do even with some cucumbers from the store, or maybe you have a farmer's market and you want to grab a few cucumbers and onions. This is something that is, to me, so delicious, tastes like summer, and it takes a little to no effort because we're not truly canning these. We're just going to stick them in the refrigerator. So I'm going to make my brine in another quart jar here, and I'm adding sugar, 1 part sugar to 3 parts vinegar, and then I'm adding in some mustard seed, celery seed, and salt, and a little bit of turmeric, mostly for color. It makes them so pretty. And I'm going to mix this all together and pour that brine over these cucumbers and stick these in the refrigerator. Now, I just made these the other day, and sticking them in the refrigerator, I think they only sat there for about 24 hours before we couldn't wait any longer and had to try them out. And they were already so delicious. But you can store these in the refrigerator for a really long time. Similar recipes will say from up to 9 months or even a year, but they're never going to last that long in my refrigerator, so I don't really have to worry about that. Now, I kind of forgot I had some onions from our garden, our huge onion harvest where we got like 5 onions out of the garden this year. They were sitting on my back porch kind of curing, so I brought them in, and you should layer the onions with the cucumbers, but they were a last minute addition that I forgot about, so that's why they're on top. They're going to get stirred in later. Pack them into the jars as tight as you can because that liquid will find all of the openings and crevices, and just make sure that everything's pushed down in that brine and stick these in the refrigerator. Wait if you can. You gotta wait at least 24 hours. I promise it'll be worth it. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna show you how these became part of our favorite summertime dinner too. I also wanted to mention, if you run out of cucumbers and onions in your brine, don't throw it out. You can use that brine again to just add more cucumbers and onions and stick it back in the refrigerator until they're ready again. Now, the next homemade item I'm going to share with you is hamburger buns, or just buns in general. I use this recipe for hot dog buns or hamburger buns, sandwich buns, all the buns, hun. This is an easy go-to that I will share and link below, but they are so delicious and honestly really simple. Honestly, they're so simple. I wonder why I still find myself choosing to buy buns at the store every once in a while. I think my excuse is that hamburger night is generally an easy dinner night where I haven't planned ahead, so it feels really spontaneous. And in my mind, it feels like it'll take forever to make hamburger buns and let them rise. But the reality is that this recipe that I've used is so simple, you don't even really have a big bulk rise time. And they're so easy to throw in the oven. So as soon as I thaw out the meat from the freezer for hamburgers, I could just put these together, and it's so much easier. I will say, just to be completely honest, I've been really lazy with this summer, but I don't really feel like we've had a ton of burger nights either, so maybe that's it too. But they are so good. I love the little sesame seeds, and they turn out absolutely gorgeous. So if I wanted to have a back porch dinner night and have some friends over, these would definitely be something that should be on the menu. Now we're using our farm fresh beef there, and just having a from scratch, from the farm type of meal here. Delicious. Now we have a seasoning there on the burgers that's homemade. I'll be sure to link below. But that's another thing that I love making at home rather than buying at the store, and that is all-purpose seasonings, taco seasonings, chili seasonings. And one I use probably most frequently is our taco seasoning. And I'm going to put this down below for you, but it's all sorts of those usual flavors of paprika and cumin, chili powder, onion powder, garlic powder, salt and pepper, crushed red pepper. Did I already say that? Again, I will be sure to type all of this out for you. But I usually make up a double batch of this and keep it in this jar. I know with the blue lid that it is the taco seasoning. Someday I'm going to get everything labeled and pretty, but it's funny how you just have those little things in your home that you know what is in it. Probably drives my husband crazy, but I'm basically the only one that ever makes tacos, so it's okay. To every pound of meat, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of that mixture, and that seems to be about the right amount for us. If you want a little bit more heat, you could add some cayenne pepper to that recipe as well. But taco night is just a go-to around here. I love having all of the fresh ingredients in the summertime too, and a taco bowl is pretty hard to beat. But that brings me to our absolute favorite summertime dinner, or it seems like it's just one of those dinners you don't get real often, and it always screams summertime to me, and that is BLTs. But I'm talking from scratch, homemade, all the fixins, so good. Now, we have our homemade sandwich bread here that I feel like just turned out so well. My little family, though, can go through basically an entire loaf for dinner on a sandwich night. And we were lucky enough to have a few fresh garden tomatoes. There's just nothing like that. Our farm fresh bacon that we've raised ourselves, homemade mayo, and those pickles that you and I put in the fridge yesterday. Now, we didn't have any lettuce because it's been scorching hot here all of a sudden, and everything I had left got pretty wilted in the garden. So maybe we can try again when it cools off this fall. But for right now, our greens on the sandwich are the pickles. And I have to quote my husband. He said, "This might be the best BLT sandwich I've ever had." Or is it a BLP or BBPT? You know what I mean. He may have just been really tired and hot and hungry, but I have to agree that this sandwich hit the spot and totally tasted like summer, thanks to all of our homemade ingredients. So I hope today's video has encouraged you to pick something to make homemade. Now I want to encourage you to not try to do all the things at once. As you saw in this video, it takes time and seasons of life to work through recipes and find your own favorite homemade go-to items to replace those store-bought favorites. So choose one, perfect it, and then move on, making it a part of your routine every week. Let me know in the comments below which recipe you would like to try or which thing you are hoping to switch into making instead of buying. I would love to know. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And I hope to see you back here again very soon.